With the release of Fire Emblem Three Houses, the topic of bad Fire Emblem maps has been brought up again. While I agree that Fire Emblem Three Houses doesn't have the most stellar map design, I can't necessarily agree that Fire Emblem Three Houses has the worst map designs. Just boring ones. There's nothing unique to most of the maps, and we see the same maps over and over again in all three different routes, which I think cements the idea of that it's boring. But I think I can say that these maps get the jobs done for the most part. The same could be said about the entirety of Fire Emblem Echo Shadows of Valentia, where the maps just get the job done but aren't too interesting. No, seriously, someone looked at this and thought, what if River? And that's basically how most of the maps were created by then. So if boring isn't bad, then what makes a map bad? When I asked a few months back what's unfair about Fire Emblem, I was greeted with an overwhelming response of fog of war and same turn reinforcements.
Right.
While there is grounded arguments that, yeah, same turn reinforcements is grounded in reality, it just doesn't feel fair in a game about properly using the information given to you. And I think the same could be argued for Fog of War. It just forces the players to play slow and steady, which might not be the playstyle for everyone. On top of that, Fog of War only affects the players and never the enemy, something that didn't carry over from Fire Emblem sister series Advanced Wars, where the enemy also couldn't see ahead of them. So then, what does make a map bad? I'd argue that a map is bad when it's unfair, when there's very little information given to the players, and the map by its mechanics limits your movement, forcing you through a slow slog. And I'm pretty sure you've already guessed it, but my personal worst map is Fire Emblem 6's Chapter 14, Arcadia. Without fail, when talking to my friends and peers about Fire Emblem 6, there's always at least one complaint or person talking about Chapter 14. It's first and foremost a Fog of War map where the enemies can see you, but you can't see them. It's also Fire Emblem 6 where its features are same turn reinforcements that you can't see. And it's a desert map, forcing some of your best units, most likely the Cavs, to go through this awful desert with very limited movement. Of course, the goddess of FE6 Melody is untouched, but on harder difficulties of FE6, it's hard to justify pushing Melody far ahead of the front lines of your main army without having any real information. On top of that, this game force deploys two units, Cecilia, who isn't bad, but for this map, arguably the worst character in the game, and Sofia, who's a level 1 shaman when you've already passed halfway through the game. And with how Fire Emblem 6 is set up in its mechanics, the priest will always target Sofia as their main sleep target whenever she's in range, making this already slow chapter an even slower one, because you have to babysit her. Talk about the worst first impressions for both units right here. And do you want the guidance chapter that comes right after? Well, be sure to complete this chapter in 25 turns or less with Sofia still alive, or well, shoot, you aren't getting the true ending to Fire Emblem 6. But by how difficult this map is, at the very least, if you can get to the end of the map, Sofia can guarantee you a guiding ring. Just like in other GBA FE titles, where if you step on certain tiles, you can collect certain items that range from good to pretty good to really good. So my tip to new players is to bring a thief, torches, torch staff to speed the process up and guarantee you risk-free options. Abuse characters like Melody and or Shauna if you trained her up by this chapter. The boss is kind of a pushover if you attack at a range with high resistance units, since he has the light brand equipped. Without spoiling too much of this chapter, the twin berserkers will spawn a little later in the map, but I'm assuming that you have either Rutger or Deke trained up by this point, so they should be no problem. The difficulty will be collecting all the items and finishing this chapter up in 25 turns, so if you had to prioritize items, I suggest trying to pick up the silver card and the boots at the very least. If you also cut through the center of the map while having a detour with a thief to go up to the top for the silver card, you for the most part will avoid same turn reinforcements that come in the same turn. If you can also afford to rescue Sofia, then just rescue her and keep her rescued. Air Caliber is also a fantastic weapon for this chapter, as there are many wyvern flyers that just come after you from all sides of the map. But with that being said, I'm curious what your least favorite map in the series is, and how did you beat it? This has been JaeAIK. This was my first in my short series titled To The Point, where I talk about a variety of topics in a short and concise manner. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys next time.
せるものか